Hi, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to part two of my tutorial for the Easy University Controller assignment. And in part two, we're going to put in some new code. In part one, we did just refactoring. And in part two, we're going to use the same coding approach that we used in part one, but now that we have the list pages exactly like we want them, we're going to do the detail pages. Okay, and of course, one part of this is that we need to put the template together for each of the detail pages. And we didn't do this earlier because we didn't want to do it without hooking it up and being able to test it. And yet we didn't want to do kind of everything in 1 week. So here we're catching up on the templates compared to the pace at which things are going in the Pinkham book. And we're going to take it from there. Okay, so we're going to need a view, a detail view for each of our model classes. So that's instructor, section, course, semester, student, and registration. Okay? So how's this going to go? Well, I'm going to do a couple of these, maybe three, and then you're going to do the rest on your own. Okay? And again, the coding approach is pretty consistent with the coding approach that we took in part one. Just a couple more details when we're going to do a detail page. All right, so let's see. Let's do the instructor first. I always like to do that first, probably because I'm an instructor. So I'm going to take the instructor detail template from my already baked version, and I explained what I meant by already baked back in part one. If you missed that, you're going to have to back up. Okay, and here we are. So it's not a list, it's just going to show a single instructor. So up in the top, we've got the block title, and we have instructor hyphen, and then we render the template variable instructor. Okay, and then down here in the body where the content block gets inserted, we have an H2 where we render instructor. And again, when we use this object, the entire object, and we are asking for a text rendering of it, what's going to happen is the toString, or sorry, that's the Java term, the string method on that model class, the instructor model class, is going to be called, and we're going to get back the appropriate string that represents the instructor, which is going to be last name comma first name. Okay, so down in here we have organized the fields associated with an instructor into a table. And in the left column, we have the names of the fields, first name and last name. And in the right column, we have, we are rendering those fields, the contents of the fields, first name and last name. And we do that by taking this variable instructor, which is holding the instructor object, and asking to render the first name field from that object, and in this case, the last name. Okay, now instructors are assigned sections to teach. So we want to show a list of all the sections that this instructor is assigned to. And we have a section list, which is being passed in the context from our view. So we say from section in section list, and then we're going to have a list item. And this is going to be a link. And the reason why we're going to have it be a link is that if we click on this, it's going to take us to another detail page. Okay, so if we want to go to the detail page for that section, we're going to, that's where we're going to go. Okay, and that's in keeping with this highly interlinked nature of these kinds of applications. This is the way they're typically built. Okay, if in fact we don't have any sections in the section list, which is going to trigger empty, we're going to say there are currently no sections for this instructor. Okay, that's how we're going to do it. Okay, so I really recommend that you work kind of backwards in the workflow of Django. Okay, because the last thing that happens is that we render the template. Okay, what comes before that? Well, we invoke the view. So let's go to the view. Let's go to views.py for course info and open that up. And we see that we have a class-based view for instructor list, and we need to add one for instructor detail. And I'm just going to take my code out of my already baked version and paste it in here rather than have you watch me type it, and then we'll talk about it. Okay. Okay, now before we go too far, I can see that there are two function calls, one get object referral for and one render to response, that I don't have inputs for. And we can fix that. They're all part of Django shortcuts. Now we have an import for render in Django shortcuts, but that's it. So I'm going to paste the code from my pre-coded, pre-baked version. And let's make that code a little bit easier to see. Make it a little bigger. Okay. All right, so now we have those. Okay, so let's look at the instructor detail. So the first thing to notice is it is a subclass of view. So it's going to be the same kind of class as instructor list was. Okay. The other thing is it has an implementation for the get method, which means this is going to handle a get. And what's a get? Well, a get is the kind of request we get when you click on the link on the HTML page. Okay? As compared to a post, which is what you get when you click on the submit button of an HTML form. Okay? And we don't have any HTML forms yet. When we do, we're going to also implement the method for post, but for right now, we're going to just implement the method for get. Okay. So, what are the arguments or parameters that we are getting in? Well, we've got a reference to self, which we always have in these object-oriented methods. We have the request. We got that before. But we have a third thing. And what is this? Well, this is a string Actually, it's not a string. It's an integer that's been picked out of the request. Okay, because in this request we're asking for a particular instructor, and we're using the integer primary key, which is the instructor ID. We're passing in the integer primary key, which we're pulling out of the URL. We'll see that when we get to urls.py. And we have to pass it through here because we use the primary key in order to go get the object. Okay? So we're getting an instructor object. We're going to keep it in a variable called instructor. And we're going to use a really shortcut-oriented call, get object or 404. And here's what happens here. It either will get the object or it will immediately return an error page with a 404 error code that says that the resource was not found. Okay? So we don't have to handle the error. Okay? The error gets handled as part of Django magic. So this is a pretty cool imperative here because we say get the object and bring it back to me. It's an instructor object. The primary key is equal to that PK field that came in. Okay, and that's how you're going to know which instructor I want. Okay, and it either gets it or it sends an error page back to the browser, and we don't even have to intervene. It happens automatically. So this PK is sort of interesting. It's not a very descriptive field. Okay. For instance, the first time that I built this application, I decided I wasn't going to use this kind of PK shortcut that the Django guys are fond of, and I was going to code in something like instructor ID, so it'd be better documentation of what I wanted. Unfortunately, I discovered that this calling the primary key by this PK shortcut name has some power later in our work, a couple of weeks from now, when we want to use more of the Django magic. So if you want to use the Django magic, you have to use the Django abbreviations. And so the abbreviation for primary key is PK. And I've decided to use it this time so we can take advantage of all the Django magic that is possible. Okay, at this point we have an instructor, but we don't have a list of sections that instructor is attached to, has a relationship with. And to do that, we create a variable section list. Okay, and we populate it by using the instructor object that we got back, and then we're going to use the sections field that appears to be on the instructor object, and I'll explain that in a minute, and then we want all of them. Okay. Okay, so does instructor really have a sections field? Well, implicitly it does. Let's go to the models. Okay, and then let's go to instructor. Okay, so what does instructor have? Well, it's got a first name, it's got a last name. Does it have sections? Nope. Let's go to section. Okay. And we go down here, section ID, section name, semester, course, instructor, and then it shows it's a foreign key for instructor, related name sections. Okay, so this makes a variable appear on our instructor called sections that holds references to all the sections that are associated with the instructor. Okay, and that's just because we coded related name. Okay, if we didn't code this, then we wouldn't have a way back. Okay, so even though we're not explicitly coding a field called sections on instructor, it's implicitly there. Okay, that's why we were able to use it. Okay, that's enough of that. Let's go back to views. So now the last thing that we need to do is we need to render a page. Okay, and just like we've done in the past, when we render a page, what do we need? Well, we need a template page, right? And we need a context. Well, here's a reference to the template page. Okay. Are we explicitly loading the template page? Nope. That's just part of the magic of this render to response, which we haven't used before. Okay. It loads our template page for us. How does it know what the template page is? Well, we're passing it in. Okay, that makes sense. What's the context again? Well, the context is a dictionary that holds all of the data that we're going to need to render on our template page. So on our template page, the variable name known as instructor is going to be populated with instructor from the view. And the variable name known as section list is going to be populated with the section list from the view. So these things don't magically appear in the template. They're only available in the template because we put them into the context. Okay? So this render to response takes a template and a context, and it goes from there. All right, well, that makes sense. Now, what else do we need? Well, we need an entry in urls.py. So let's go to urls.py. Okay, open it up. Okay, so it looks like we want to have something in between instructor and section. I'd like to keep these things in a pretty good order. Okay, so I tend to do instructor list, instructor detail view, instructor update, blah, 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 blah. I try to keep all the instructor stuff together so it's easier to find. Okay. Now, could you decide that you want all the lists together and you want all the details together? I guess one could do that. I think that my practice is probably the more popular one. And I think it's pretty well consistent with what you see Pinkham do in the Django Unleashed tutorial. Okay, so let's go. Let's look at what's this going to be for the instructor detail. Well, it's a path expression. It's a little more, fancier. So instructor detail is the name of our class-based view for the instructor detail. I need to do an import on it, so I'm going to say alt return and pick that one. And now we can probably make these a little bigger. Instructor detail. I like to keep these having been kind of a single list, so I got that. So let's look at our path, okay? It's the same up through the slash after instructor. Now, what's between the next set of slashes? Well, in angle brackets, we have a data type and a parameter name. Okay, so this is a keyword parameter that we're going to pass to the view. It's going to be called PK. Okay, we're expecting to find between the slashes, we're expecting to find an int. We're going to put it into PK, which is going to be an int type, and that's going to be passed as a keyword parameter to the view. And how do we know what view? Well, it's instructor detail as view, and if we go to views and the instructor detail that we put there, it's expecting us to have a parameter coming through called PK. So we've got it all linked up together. Okay, well, how about testing it? Let's do it. Okay, because we did the template, then we did the view, then we did the URLs. We've got all three pieces of that chain. So we should be able to run manage py.task, or whatever it's called, manage.pytask, run server. Okay, that looks like it's working fine. Crank up the browser. Okay, and the browser came up on my other monitor. Well, not too surprising. That seems to always happen. So here's the browser. Okay, and just like we've been seeing so far, since we haven't told the application how to route a URL pattern that doesn't have anything after the domain name, we're always, when we just go to the domain name, we're always going to get a 404. The nice thing here is we can see all the rules in the urls.py. Okay, and you can see that we have one for instructor with an int after it that's going to be called PK. So we have it there. That's a good sign. And let's say instructor, and let's say 1. There it is. It's your old buddy Kevin Trainer. Well, that looks great. That's just what we wanted. Terrific. So it's that easy. Okay. And it looks like Kevin Trainer has got 3 sections. 340.001 in the fall, 340.201 in the fall, and 691.201 in the fall. It looks like Kevin's going to be pretty busy. All right, well, that's good. Now, I'm not going to turn you loose on your own yet because this section because this section is a little bit more complex. Okay, if sections are connected to students through the registration model class, right? It's a many-to-many implemented through through another table, an intersection table. Okay, let's try to do that one. So let's try to do section. Okay, let's go at it the same way. So I'm just going to copy the detail page template that I've already created, and I'm going to paste it in. And you'll see again the way I'm building these detail pages. Okay, there we go. I tried to paste it into the wrong monitor. Now that was downright embarrassing. I shouldn't have told you. Okay, we're going to paste section detail. Here it is. All right. So I'm just going to close that server and close that window so I can see better. All right. Make this a little better. So let's see what the code looks like. Okay, so we've got two blocks. We've got the title block. We've got the content block. In the title, we say section hyphen, and then we get the template to render the section variable. Okay, that's gonna call the string method on the section object. And then down in content, we begin with an H2 title that says the title of the section. And then pretty typically, I put these things into a table. I used to put the fields into an unordered list, but it didn't look as good. And so now I put them into a table. And so I've got a row for each of the fields associated with section. So I've got a row in the table for course, one for section name, one for semester, one for instructor. Okay. And for the things that represent other classes in the model, which are course, semester, and instructor, I have them rendered as a link. Okay, so we have a link to the course, a link to the section, a link to the instructor. I'm sorry, and we also have a link to the semester. They're all linkable. Okay. So, oh no, sorry, it's getting late tonight. The thing that's not linkable is the name of the section. That's just the field from the section name. So that's not linkable. The other ones are. So other ones are going to come up as a link. And then we've got registrations. Okay. All right, that makes sense. Because each section can have registrations for 0 or more students. So I'm passing in the context, I'm passing in a registration list, and I do a for in over that list. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a link to the student associated with that registration. Okay, I don't want to just point to the registration, because where would I'd like to go? Well, I'd like to go to the student if I could. Okay. Well, this is kind of interesting, because where I'm going to go is going to be a function of what I put in the href next week, I think. Okay, so for right now, what do I want the name to be? I want it to be the student. Where do I want it to go? I probably do want it to go to the registration object, but I don't want to have the registration has a big long name that includes the name of this section and the name of the student, and I don't want that. I want the shorter one that's over the name of the student. Okay? So, and yet I'm probably going to point at this to the registration. All right, so I think that'll work. Now, we did the template. What do we do next? We go to views.py. Okay? So what you're going to do on these is you're going to copy and clone one of these detail views into the next. Okay? But I've already coded my section view. So I'm going to go to my already baked version. I already have my section detail view here. And I'm going to copy the code so you don't have to watch me cloning and copying it, right? And I'm going to put it right here. And that's separated by 2 and separated by 2. Okay, so let's see this. This is a little more code than we had for the last of the detail view. And for the most part, that has to do with the fact that there's just more data associated with a section than there is associated with an instructor. Okay, so the instructor is one of the easy ones. The section is one of the hard ones. Okay. So again, we have an implementation for get. That's the HTTP get. That's what you get when you click on a link. Okay. We're passing in a reference to the object itself, reference to the request, and the PK. That's going to be taken out of the URL again. What is the PK? Well, it's going to be the section ID. Again, we call get object or 404. We want a section object to come back. We're going to put it into the variable section. And PK equals PK is a way for us to tell the function that we're calling get object or 404 what the primary key is of the object that we'd like to bring back. If we don't bring it back successfully, we don't return from this call. Okay? Control passes to some other part of Django and it returns a 404 page. Okay? We don't return and complete the rest of the view. If we got the object okay, well then we have to start to we have to start to populate the variables that we're going to place in the context. Okay, so what does it need? It needs a reference to semester. So we populate that with section semester, course, section.course, instructor, section.instructor. Now we need a list of all the registrations. So we have a variable called registration list, and then we say section registrations. Okay, that's an explicit field actually, and then we say all. Okay, and now when we do the call to render to response, what do we pass to that? Well, we pass it the template. Okay, and when you're cloning these, you have to remember to change the names of all this stuff, right? We've got the template, and then in the context, which is a Python dictionary, we're placing the following variables: section, semester, course, instructor, registration list. So the name that they're going to be known as in the template are the same names that they're going to be that the variables are called here in the view. That's a good practice. Does it have to agree? No, but it's a good practice. Okay, so now we've got the section detail view. Now we want to do the urls.py. Okay, so again, I'm going to put section detail after section list. Okay, and let me find my way to urls.py and find section detail. And again, you're going to have to clone one of these into the next as you go through them. And I've got the benefit of being able to copy it from my finished code. So this looks good, except the section detail needs an import. So I'm going to do an alt return and pick that one and make sure that gets in its single list, so it looks very neat. And then let's look at this. So it says section, and then between the slashes, again, we are expecting an integer type, and we're going to associate that with the argument name or parameter name pk. Okay, it's pointing to the proper view. Now, all of these things have consistent names. This is going to allow us to use this when we hook up all the links, because we're going to actually get these URL patterns. We're actually going to get these to generate the URL that we plunk into the href. It's pretty magical, but it works. Okay, so again, we've done the entire flow kind of backwards. We did the template page, then we did the view associated with the template page, and then we did the URL path associated with that view. So let's try and test this. So let's get our server up again. Okay. And do run server. Okay. And that seems to be working fine. Okay, and still seems to be working fine. I always like to look and see, okay, yeah, we do have the URL routing for section with an int pk, so that looks like that's going to work just fine. Okay, and now let's whoop, that didn't work. Let's add on section 1, and there's section 1. And then let's look at section 2. There's section 2. That's looking good too. Let's see what happens if we ask for a section that's not there. 99. Not there. Okay. Let's also go back. Let's go back. Whoops. Let's do section 3. See what we get for 3. Okay. And you can see here there are currently no students registered for this section. So we don't have any registrations there. But I do think we had some registrations for section 1. Let's look. Do we? Yeah. Franny Stagliano has a registration. Okay. And you can see registrations have a name that's a combination of the name of the section and the name of the student, so they're really long. We know what section this is, and so we reached across and we got the name from the student all by itself. We're probably going to have a link to the registration detail page here, okay? But of course we haven't hook that up yet. We will hook that up really soon, probably next week, I think. Okay, great. So I've done my part. Let's see. I've done the detail pages for instructor. I have instructor detail and section detail, and I'm going to want you to do the other 4. So I want you to do the course, the semester, the student, and the registration. Okay? And we'll see how they go. Okay? So probably of the work that I've given you so far to do on your own, this is probably the most challenging bit, but I think you can do it. And if you get stuck, well, you can talk to me or you can talk to the TA. We're here to help. But I'm fairly confident that that you may have a problem or two, but you ought to be able to code the 3 parts for the other 4 model classes. So the 3 parts are the template file, the .html file, the entry in views.py, and then the entry in urls.py. And then, of course, whatever you do, make sure that you test your work. Okay, that's it for part 2. I'm going to say bye until next time. Bye-bye.